What's going on, guys? This is Dave from Otaku, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about deep dives. So, a deep dive is a term that I and some of the other people on Nuke Marine's Discord came up with. It's a pretty simple term when you kind of get down to it. Deep diving is basically when you choose to sentence mine just one source. And the reason why this all came about, right, is a pretty logical reason. Basically, if you look at like the history of sentence mining's past, you're basically going to see that sentence mining started off with you should mine sentences from the sources that you're actually immersing with. And this was great logic, right? Because that way you knew that the words that you were mining and learning were going to show up in your immersion, right? They were showing up in your immersion because you were pulling it from that. It made it more memorable, right? This was a great thing. However, there was a problem, and that problem was it took a lot of time to get those sentences, right? And as many of you guys know, I'm a pretty busy guy, and a lot of the other people out there who are studying languages, especially Japanese or any other language really, are in the same situation where they don't have a lot of time to just sit around and mine sentences. Instead, we can kind of use technology to benefit us so that we can do this a lot faster. So what that kind of evolved into eventually was we started using frequency lists, right? So a while back I created the Netflix frequency list, and a lot of people were a big fan of that, and basically you could be like, okay, well I want to learn the first 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words on the Netflix frequency list, which is a frequency list based off of all of the subtitles, the Japanese subtitles on Japanese Netflix, and I could take those words and I could just learn from that frequency list, and that would be great too. And some people were doing that directly, other people were doing that while applying it with a program called MorphMan to their actual sentence banks and mining that way. And all of these worked, but there's kind of a pitfall, right? And that pitfall is that the words on the Netflix frequency list, while they are common, they won't necessarily show up in your immersion, right? And some people did some calculations, actually No Campo specifically did some calculations, and it came about that he found that once you got to about 4,000 to 5,000 words on the Netflix frequency list, it got to a point where the growth and understanding of your ability with shows that you're actually immersing with would start growing really, really slow. So it kind of came down to, well, how do we mine shows specifically and use the content that we're actually learning, and then also at the same time do it a quick and efficient way where we can utilize MorphMan and the Netflix frequency list and make sure that we're learning popular words. And basically the way we came up with doing that was doing a deep dive. So No Campo created a new version of MorphMan where MorphMan will literally look at the subtitle files from a show that you're interested in, whatever show that you want it to be, whatever the subtitle files that you have. It'll look at each individual subtitle file and it will compare those words in that subtitle file against the Netflix frequency list, so it can pick the most common words from the Netflix frequency list from those shows. The reason why this would happen is because a lot of times when you're mining a single show, you're gonna get down to the point where you're learning a word that only shows up one time in the entire series, and you wanna make sure that the word that you choose to get you over a certain percentage of understanding is actually gonna be a popular word, right? One that's is gonna be used a lot in other shows, not just in the show you're watching. So you can take a look at each individual episode of a show with MorphMan, and it does it automatically. It's going to automatically create a frequency list from that show, and it's going to use MorphMan to pick what words you should learn from that show. It's a really simple and really great process. There's a lot of technology involved, but when you get right down to it, once you have it implemented on your system, it becomes really, really easy to do, and it's a super intuitive thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and take today to show you how I've been using this and how I've been doing deep dives into shows. So far, I've deep dived 3 different shows. I did Umaru-chan, I did Boku no Hero, and I did Otaku ni Koi wa Muzakashi, or Wotakoi as it's commonly called. And so I've kind of had some experience with doing this, and I've kind of tweaked my process a little bit, and so I'm going to show you guys today how I've been doing that so I can maybe help you. And I'm also going to go into a little bit about the whole MorphMan settings, because that seems to be some of the questions that most people have or are having the most issues with. Cool, welcome back to my computer. So today I'm going to go ahead and show you what I've been doing. So the first thing that's going to be necessary for this whole process, right, is you're obviously going to have a show and the subtitle files downloaded, right? So here in my giant anime folder, I have Otaku ni Koi wa Muzakashi, And here's all the subtitles for that show, and I have it in a separate folder on purpose, just so that MorphMan has an easier time finding the subtitle files in there. If you have your subtitle files and your show in the same folder, it might make MorphMan mess up. I'm pretty sure it does. So make sure you have subtitle files for a show that you want to do. When you're picking a show for doing a deep dive, basically you should pick something that you're interested in, one, and two, you kind of want to try to pick a show that's going to have a little bit more useful vocabulary to you, and that really is going to depend on you specifically, what you think is useful, right? For me, I do eventually want to get to the point where I feel like I'm completely conversational in Japanese, and that means I'm probably going to pick shows that are more likely to have conversational Japanese in them, but pretty much all shows will, right? So you can kind of pick and choose what you're interested in. I do suggest that people, for their very first deep dive, choose like a slice of life anime or drama, or you can also do books, but there's nothing wrong with doing books, but the only issue you're gonna run into with that is shows have audio, and that's really beneficial. So it might be better to do a show because there's audio involved, but you can do a book as well. But picking a slice of life might be a better choice because it's going to have a little bit easier grammar sometimes, and it's going to have a little bit easier vocabulary and more common vocabulary that's going to show up in all your shows. So doing that first might be a good choice. Things like Wotakoi, things like Toradora, shows like that might be really good. But I did Boku no Hero Academia as well, so picking things that you're interested in also is important. So cool, so we got the subtitle files here. So you're gonna go ahead and open up MorphMan, right? And here's mine. And then I also have the MII dictionary add-on. Right now, I believe this is still in beta, so you can't just download it yet from the add-on store or whatever they call it. But that should be coming out soon. However, if you're willing to donate $5 to their Patreon, you can get this add-on, and it has revolutionized how I've been sentence binding, so I highly, highly suggest it. It's a really great add-on. Anyways, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at our MorphMan settings and make sure everything's right? So I'm gonna go ahead and assume that you can install MorphMan on your own. All you really need to do for that is you're just gonna go over here and you're gonna go under Tools and then go to Add-ons, and then you're going to go to Get Add-ons or Install from File, right? And then you just type in the number, or if you've downloaded the file, you just install from the file directly. It's pretty easy, right? However, you got to do that first before anything else. So one of the big issues that people have been having though is making MorphMan work correctly with their sentence bank, right? Like Matt vs. Japan put out an excellent guide. It is top notch for setting up MorphMan and making it look at your sentence bank and putting all the settings in and everything, right? However, a lot of people have been reading it directly and just copy and pasting things, and it's not quite right. You need to make sure that your sentence bank is set up for your cards, right? So if I go down to my MorphMan preferences here, you're gonna see that if in the note filter section that I have my sentence bank, my note filter to look at my cards specifically, right? So I have the Tango cards that I have two different Tango cards because I have one of the original Tango decks that was released by Nuke Marine, so the card setup was different, and I didn't feel like rearranging, those 1,000 cards from the N5 book, so I have two different ones, right? And I have it set up to look at my Japanese sentences and my Japanese vocabulary. Now, you don't have to have it look at both, but some of the sentences that I did, I changed it to like full kanji, whereas some of the vocabulary, I left it as hiragana or katakana without changing it to kanji. So I decided to have it look at both. And you'll notice that I don't have any of these checked for the Tango. It's because you don't really need to apply MorphMan to your Tango decks if you're doing Tango. And that's because those sentences are already in an I+1 order, so don't mess with it. Like, don't rearrange it, there's no point, right? They're already I+1, so it'd be a waste of time. So then I also have this one right here, which is my subs to SRS deck, right? Where I have it look at the expression field, right? And of course it's set to Japanese. And this one I do have clicked to modify. And basically, that's because I want MorphMan to rearrange those cards, right? So if that's clicked, then it's gonna rearrange cards. If it's not clicked, it's not gonna rearrange cards. But the one thing I really wanna show you guys here is the field name, right? If you look at the field name, that field name needs to be the same field name that you're looking at on your cards. So if I go to one of my cards and pull up my browser here, hit B, and I look at like my Tango N3 cards, you'll notice that I have these fields, right? Tango, vocab, Japanese. And it should be, yep, Tango, sentence, Japanese. You need to make sure that you're using the names from your fields specifically, right? If I go to my Subster SRS Bank and I look at any of the cards in there, you'll notice that I have an expression field, right? It's just basically, it needs to look directly at what your cards actually have. That's really important. And I think that's one of the areas where a lot of people have been messing up. Cool. So once you have MorphMan set up properly, and you have all your preferences set up the way you want them to. I also have this all note types, just looking at the expression fields. It's really not necessary to do that, but basically it will just look at any other cards that I've built. Like I have a grammar, dictionary of Japanese grammar, 2 decks that I'm working on with that, and yeah. So it'll look at those ones too, or anything else that I feel like installing and just calling an expression field. It's just to save me a little bit of time, but you don't need to do that at all. So once you have MorphMan set up though, then all you need to do is calculate database. Quick way, just hit Control-M, and it's gonna go ahead and look at all of your database and say, okay, these are the words that I think you know, and usually it's pretty good. Cool, all updated. So now basically, you need to set up MorphMan so it'll actually look at a show that you're interested in, right? So it's telling me I have 6,400 known morphs and 6,700 variants of those morphs. So you're gonna go down to your tools section. Now, a lot of people have had questions about like, well, what about frequency lists, installing them directly into MorphMan using the database manager, and going through all of that stuff and creating individual frequency lists for shows and all that. Thankfully, because of the new MorphMan setup, you don't need to go in here. I don't actually even go into my database manager almost at all anymore. There's almost no point to, unless you really just want to take a look and do some comparison and create frequency lists so that you can use before NoCompo put out a spreadsheet that you could look at frequency lists and do the comparison and everything like that, right? You don't need to do that anymore, right? That's still a great tool if you just want to compare your known morphs to shows that you have, if you want to try to find a good show to mine or whatever, but you don't really need to use that stuff anymore. It all happens internally in MorphMan, and you don't really need to use the database manager anymore to do it, right? So all you really need to do now is go down and go to the MorphMan Readability Analyzer. Cool, this is a great, great tool. So basically, you're gonna go ahead and pick your target percentage that you want, right? So it's automatically set to 98%. I personally like to use 96%. I feel like at 96%, I can basically ascertain or understand the words that I'm missing just from context. And if I can't, then maybe those words are so infrequently used anyways that I don't need to learn them. And 96% is just the goal that I've set in my head, right? It's just a number. Some people go down to 90% or 88% if you're definitely on the beginner side. Maybe you've only done the N5 book and like N5 Tango, or maybe you only did KCAM and now you're ready to move on to just basic sentence mining and you don't want to do the N5, N4, N3 books or N4, whatever, setting it at a lower rate would be better. But if you're at the point where you've gone through, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 words, setting it up to 96 to 98% is probably a better idea, because then you're gonna get to a really high level of comprehension of a single show. So then you need to decide your input, right? And so basically, you're just gonna go to whatever show you're looking at, right? I showed you guys before that I have this folder, it's got a bunch of anime in it, and I wanna go directly to the subtitles folder. So I'm gonna go ahead, and I'm already in that, right? And here's Wodakoi. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the subtitles folder specifically that I have. And if you double click into that, it's not gonna show you anything, right? It's not gonna show you files. It's looking for a folder specifically. So you're gonna go ahead and select that folder. So I'll go back, click on the folder, hit select folder, great. And then you need a master frequency list. So what MorphMan is going to do is it's going to compare the subtitles to, one, it's gonna scan the entire show and it's gonna find the most frequent words. Eventually it's gonna get down to a point where there's a bunch of words that are only used one time in the entire show. And that is not a problem necessarily, because some of those words might still be really useful to learn. But MorphMan doesn't know specifically on its own of those words, which ones are gonna be the most popularly used, the most commonly used in other shows, right? And so that's where the master frequency list comes in. You might have a word that only shows up once in the entire show, but it's still like in the 10 or 12,000 most common Japanese words. So it might still be worth learning for you. And it's also gonna help with your comprehension of the show that you're deep diving, right? So if you take the Netflix frequency list, which I'll put a link in the description, and then I have another video on it, and you select that, I've just put my Netflix frequency list in my database folder under Anki, under me. I put it there just for ease of use and because it doesn't really get in the way, right? So why not? So you just go ahead and click on the Netflix frequency list or whatever frequency list you want to use. I just think this one's best. I'm biased though because I made it. And you're gonna go ahead and open that up, right? And then the rest of your settings should be automatic, right? It's gonna automatically update your known morphs database, and it's going to output it directly to the databases too, so it gets everything done for you, right? And you want to go ahead and leave all of these checked. You have your readability report, your word report, your target study plan, and your frequency list. Those you can pretty much leave checked. It's really not going to affect too much, but there's some great information if you want to go in there and look at some of these. Like if you're trying to look at a show and you want to see how readable is this show, then you can go to the readability report, things like that. Cool, so now that you have everything set up, now all you need to do is hit analyze. And MorphMan is automatically going to parse through all of your data. It's going to look at your subtitle files. It's going to look at all the morphs inside your subtitle files, do a whole bunch of calculations, and it's basically going to do pretty much fucking magic for you, right? So up here, you can see that it went through all of the subtitle files, right? There's 11 episodes in this show, and it's going to say, okay, compared to your known morphs and your total instances in the show, it's going to say you have a comprehension level of a certain percentage in that show. And then it's going to go ahead and create a study plan for you, which is great. So as you can see, we got episode 1 here. It says I'm already at 96%, which was my goal, so I don't need to learn any more morphs, right? It says that I have 13 words left in episode 2, so it's going to start adding on it. On episode 3 it says 0, and then on episode 4 it says 15, so now that number has gone from 13 up to 28 words to learn, and it's going to keep going through every single episode until it gets down to the bottom where it says I still have a total of 47 words left to learn in this show. As you guys can see, I'm almost done with this show. I'll probably be done with it in like 3 or 4 days depending on how many words I get to skip because like katakana words and things like that. But basically it's going to go ahead and look at all this stuff. And a lot of the questions that people have had said, okay, well, do I only study one episode before I move on to the next one? Or do I study like the whole show and try to get up to 96%? MorphMan is gonna do a lot of this stuff for you, right? It's just gonna set it up and it's gonna go ahead and pick cards in the order that it thinks is best. As you can see, I've already finished episode 3 and I've already finished like episode 7 and I've already finished episode 10. And that's because as you're learning words in episode 1 through 2 through 3, you're gonna be learning words that come below as well, right? And there's also gonna be words, like there's probably some words in episode 2 that MorphMan wants me to learn, but I can't learn them yet because the sentences that are in episode 2 are not I+1, right? So you need to make sure that you're learning I+1 sentences, and MorphMan's not gonna try to find me sentences that aren't I+1 or 1T, depending on your terminology. So basically, you kind of just gotta let MorphMan do its thing. Now, if there was a word that I needed to learn in episode 2 that MorphMan decided that I needed to learn, it might not grab that sentence from episode 2. It might not even grab that sentence from this show at all. It might grab it from my entire sentence bank, right? I have, I don't know, 4 or 5 at least shows uploaded into my sentence bank as a whole, and MorphMan might try to grab a sentence from one of those shows instead, and that's good, right? Because the point is not necessarily to get the card specifically from the show that you're deep diving, although that's beneficial and that's what I tend to lean towards, and I'll show you guys that when we get closer to the end of the video. But if it grabs that sentence from Umaru-chan, if it grabs it from Boku no Hero, if it grabs it from any other show that I have loaded up in my sentence bank, that's okay, because I'm still learning the I+1 word, and it's still gonna show up in my immersion, which is what we're going for, right? Cool. So once you've hit analyze, you're gonna wanna go ahead and close this out, and then you're going to resync your database, right? So just hit Control M, and that will re-up your database and pull in all your cards. All right, so once that's all loaded, guys, basically all you need to do is go into your sentence bank. A word about organizing sentence banks. You can organize your sentence bank however you like. I know that some people like to have a parent deck and then all their shows listed underneath the parent deck, and that's for like organization's sake. As long as it's all in one parent deck, that's fine. As you guys can see, I have like my Tango decks over here with a parent deck setup, and even like the smaller Tango decks inside of that parented under the deck above it. So as long as it's all your sentences are in one main subser S bank, that's fine. You can call it whatever you want, obviously. And I really do suggest having more shows than just the one you're deep diving. That way, MorphMan can look at a whole bunch of different shows to try to find your I+1 word, as opposed to just looking at the show that you're studying. Like, it might find an important word for you to learn from the show that you're studying, but it might not be able to find an I+1 sentence. So being able to have a slightly larger sentence bank makes it a lot easier for it to find I+1 words. So you're just gonna go ahead and click on your sentence bank and pull up the cards, right? And when you hit study now, this might take some time to load because MorphMan has just reparsed a bunch of things, so it needs to find your first cards. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes, sometimes it doesn't. I preset it up so it shouldn't take any time at all. So, and here's my first card. And as you can see, if you know the show Wotakoi, this isn't Wotakoi, right? This is Kimetsu no Yaiba Demon Slayer. So this is a perfect example of what I was just talking about. So it seems like it wants me to learn this word right here, which looks to me to be, yeah, hazusu, but this is hazuse, so it's like forcefully telling somebody how to do something, hazuse. And it says that hazuseru is the actual focus morph. I don't think that's gonna be right though. Yeah, that's not even showing up as a word here. So basically, in this situation, I know that this is a different form of a word. So at this point, maybe I want to look at my other cards, in which case that focus on this word, and I can just hit the L key, and that's going to bring up my browser and all the other cards that have this as a focus morph. So it's a really quick tool. Yep, and so here's a card from Wotakoi where it's saying hazuse nai, right? So it won't come off. And he's talking about an earring that he put in, I believe. Basically, you can select whatever card you want. Say you wanted this card instead of the one that MorphMan suggested. Really easy, just hit Control-Shift-S. It's gonna bring your new, your reposition new cards window up. You can also do this by, I believe you go under cards, and then yeah, you go to reposition. I just like hotkeys, so Control-Shift-S, and then you move it over, and then you just put it as your first card, and that's gonna move it over to the first card slot. That way, that's the one you can study. Pretty easy, right? Although I'm just gonna use the one that MorphMan suggested because it's a really easy I+1 sentence. You know, he's obviously telling this dude to take off his earring, right? And I think this is probably him yelling at Tanjiro saying like, take off your earring, I don't know. So we're gonna go ahead and use that. And then we're just gonna look up the first word here because I know it's hazusu, not hazuse. Although he's demanding it, right? And then from there, you just gotta find it in your dictionary. So if you're not using the dictionary add-on, you can go ahead and look it up over here in G-Show, or if you're done doing the monolingual transition, then you can go ahead and look it up monolingually in whatever dictionary you use, or if you use Colbury or whatever. But I find that the MIA dictionary add-on is absolutely the fastest. So for this one, we'll keep it bilingual for people. And then we just gotta find the word that we're looking for. So I just looked up the first kanji here because I knew that this wasn't gonna look it up, right? We already tried. So you can also just hit type in words directly in here, which is really great. And now it should just pull it up directly. Cool, and then I already have the MIA add-on set up to throw things directly over my card, so all I have to do is to point this directly over here and it should automatically pick up the definition, right? So there we go, and then I just go on to my next word. Cool, so we got masani, and then something I don't know, nandakara. So you just look up that word, Control-S. So we got masani here, and then the word I don't know, and then nandakara. And then you would just look at that word, and then it's rakuen, right? Pleasure garden, paradise, cool. Maybe I don't want to use this card, so I just hit L, and then see what other words it comes up with, right? And so, right, is this paradise? And then I also have like some from One Piece, and then another one here from Wotakoi, but I feel like this one's probably the best one right here, so Control-Shift-S and go over to 1, hit OK, make that my next new card, close the browser, it's gonna pull up that, and then I'll keep it monolingual, I'll keep it bilingual in this situation, although I have made the monolingual transition, but that doesn't really matter, right? Throw that over there. Is this paradise? Koko ga rakuin ka? Cool. And then, cool, it's gonna go right into the next card. Say I already know this card. Really quick, really easy. All you have to do is hit K, and then it'll automatically tag that card as already known, right? So go ahead and look up the word. Cool, and the person who's satisfied with a real offline life, real life. So, Ryojo. So a real life exploded. Awesome. Go ahead and next. Cool. So this is one of those situations where this is like not necessarily the best card. It's all clearly one word, and that might be the only card it has for it. No, it's got two. Yeah, so in this situation, maybe this isn't the best card, and this is where you might want to go to another place, or maybe you're just going to lean on a single word, right? So this is one of the situations where I really don't need this card, right? So I know the word avatar. This is probably the first time I've read it. That's probably not true. I've probably read it in other places, but like say I'm good with this word, right? The whole rest of the sentence I understand, and all I needed to know was avatar, and that was easy enough. So in this situation, I can go ahead and just hit K, and that will go ahead and say, look, it skipped all these alternatives, right? And then you're good to go. And it's gonna go straight into your other word, and you don't need to worry about that. It's gonna go ahead and throw that automatically in your known morphs. Cool, so at this point, guys, I studied my new words for the day. As you can see, I have a couple of reviews left specifically, but there's really not much going on anymore. I can do those reviews afterwards, but which I kind of like to do. Sometimes I like to split up my first time learning new words and my reviews to later on in the day. That's just me. That's all about how you like to study. However, now I can go and redo MorphMan. So I've already recalculated my database once just out of habit because I do it automatically, but basically after every time you do some new words, so basically every day, you should recalculate your MorphMan database. So just hit Control M, it should run through your database real quick and upload everything. And that way you'll notice that your known morph count should go up. Mine's gonna stay the same, but if you look back in the video to what that said before, you'll notice that it went up by a little bit, right? And what this does is it says, okay, MorphMan, now I know these words, so now you can look at the rest of the words that I need to know and compare those to my known morphs, and it'll help you find new cards, basically. So as soon as it's done loading though, we're going to go ahead and reanalyze our database towards our known words. You don't really have to do this every day, but I do. For me, it's I want to make sure that I'm getting the freshest words, and two, it also shows me my progress, which I like to see, especially now that I'm getting towards the end of this show. So I'm just going to go down here, go down to the MorphMan readability analyzer again, and then set up my settings just like I did before, so 96%. So the way I showed you guys to do this before was the first time you set it up. You don't need to do this every at the beginning and end of every study session, though I do it at the end of every study session. Netflix frequency list, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and hit analyze. Cool, and as you can see, that number has gone down. And I finished another episode, it looks like, too, which is great. Cool. And then I'm just going to hit close. And then after you run the analyzer, just hit Control M again to update your morphs. I don't know if you have to do this, but I always do it, and it seems that I have the best level with that, the best response to my cards with that, right? So there we go. So I kind of like posed some questions to people to see what they were thinking, what questions they had about MorphMan and what questions they had about doing deep dives, to kind of like gauge where you guys are at, what your level of knowledge was, and then basically just so I can help more people out, right? One of the things that came up was, when you're doing a deep dive, do you only watch that one single show? And for me, that answer is no. I would get so bored if I was only immersing with one single show day after day, because doing a deep dive, it's probably gonna take you, especially your first one, a month, maybe 2 months or more to get up to that point where you're at 90, 96, 98% comprehension of a single episode, right? Whatever your goal is. So if you were to immerse with only one show, especially if it's a shorter one like this one, only 11 episodes for that long, you would get so bored. You wouldn't want to study anymore unless you were just obsessed with that show. I know I couldn't do it. So the answer is absolutely no. And then some of the other questions that came in to go with that is, do you only immerse with one episode at a time of that show when you're immersing with that show until you get to 98% on that show and further on, further on, further on? And once again, for me, that answer is no. I couldn't just watch the same episode over and over and over again. I would get bored. And one of the biggest things about studying any language this way is making sure that you're entertained, making sure that you're doing the things that you enjoy just in your new target language, right? Matt's talked about this multiple times, so I don't really need to hound on it. But basically, you should just be doing what you enjoy, right? So I'm definitely going to immerse with that show. I'm definitely going to watch it multiple times all the way through because I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to study with that show, but I'm not going to make it the source of my only immersion. I'm not just going to watch one episode at a time over and over and over again because that would suck. And I'm trying to make this as fun of a process as possible. I'm not learning Japanese because it's like this goal that I must learn everything possible. I'm learning Japanese because I want to know another language, and because I'm moving to Japan because of the military, and because I want to enjoy doing things in a new language, right? So that's all it's about. So what I do suggest is watching the show that you're deep diving with multiple times. I definitely do suggest that. What I normally do is when I go to the gym, I watch whatever show I'm deep diving because I usually, when I work out, 90% of the time I just go to Stairmaster and then lift a little bit afterwards. So while I'm on the Stairmaster, I'll watch like 2 episodes of the show, and I do that 4 times a week. But I mean, basically just watch the show at your leisure. One of the things you can use is like if you use Vicarious and watch the show and click on the subtitles as you're going to look up words. But you definitely want to watch the show multiple times. However, you don't want to make it your only immersion source. Definitely go out there and immerse with other things because the words that you're learning are going to show up in the other things you're immersing with too, most likely. We just want to guarantee that some of the words that we are studying are going to show up in our immersion by watching that show a couple of times. Now, if you're studying like a really long show, something that's like more than 20 episodes, maybe you want to break it up into 10 episodes chunks that you're watching until you kind of move on. Like, I wouldn't take that as religion by any means, but it's a lot easier to watch like 10 or 12 episodes and then move on to the next 10 or 12 episodes and deep dive that way than it would be to watch like Full Metal Alchemist, which I think has like 50 something episodes, right? And try to watch the entire show multiple times over and over and over again. While the idea is that the words that we're learning in episode 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and so on are going to show up in 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which absolutely happens, as you guys just saw. It would be better to stick to a smaller chunk of episodes at a time, I think. But you can absolutely do whatever you like. The whole point of this is that this isn't gospel. This is just suggestions. This is how I've been doing it. This is how I've found that things have been going the best. Some people have also asked, do you only watch a single episode until 98%? Pretty much covered that. Do you still need to use the spreadsheet that No Compo made and the script that he used for Python? So the Python script that he made separately from MorphMan went into MorphMan to make this. So you no longer need to use that Python script. He basically built this into MorphMan so that people who were having trouble with it could just use it internally, and it's a much better system, obviously. And same with the spreadsheet. So basically the spreadsheet data is being done automatically in MorphMan automatically now. So like if you would like to use the spreadsheet to track your own progress, to compare shows, to compare different shows that you're not deep diving with to the Netflix frequency list, then that's great. However, you don't need to use those anymore, right? You could have just, you could just run it through MorphMan, whatever show that you're looking at, compare it to your known morphs and see how many morphs you would have to learn just by looking at the subtitle or running the subtitle files through, and then do it with another show and then another show and another show, right? So that's it. But yeah, guys, if you have any more questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. I'll try to answer the best I can. If you have any suggestions, I'll always take them. But yeah, thanks so much for watching the video, and I hope that it helped. And yeah, if you have any more suggestions for videos that you would like to see or need some help with some content, let me know in the comments below. Awesome. Later.